This is the setup I shall be using today. It's a little bit different from the way some people do it. You'll notice the line is coming off the top of the reel. It can also come off the bottom as well, but I'll talk about that later on. This line is braid, and it's bonded braid, and only 4-pound breaking strain. The advantage of braid is that it floats, and there's no stretch. So if we're trotting the float down a long way, I can still set the hook easily. The float is a loafer float, which is very buoyant because the water here is fast and very turbulent, and the turbulence would pull a smaller float under. Just below the float here, we have a join in the line. I mentioned the braid before. Below it is fluorocarbon, which doesn't cast a shadow over the fish's head. It's joined together with a double grinner knot with just a little dab of rig glue to secure it. Further down the line, instead of bulk shot, I use an olivette, which causes less resistance to the water, sinks quicker, and is better to hold back with. Underneath there is a little tiny swivel, which is a bearing swivel, which actually works under pressure, which most swivels don't. Then we have a copolymer hook length, in this case 3-pound breaking strain, with one small shot as a dropper, and a size 16 barbless hook. I showed you early on the setup I'm using. I'd like to talk now a little bit about the centre pins. Now, you can pay an awful lot of money for centre pins, anything up to sort of £600, £700, £800. The one I've got on the rod here, I paid £10 for in a tackle shop. You don't have to spend a fortune. You'll notice that on the reel here, my line comes off the top. I do this for a very good reason, although many people use it off the bottom. When I'm playing a big fish, the reel will turn that way as the fish is taking line. If you've got it off the bottom, it would turn that way, and as I'm breaking it with my thumb, if it turns that way, it tends to push against the joint of my thumb and push my thumb up and away from the reel, thereby losing control. With the line off the top, it turns away from my thumb and I can maintain a steady pressure. One of the main problems people have with centre pins is they can't cast with them. I'm going to show you two methods of casting. First of all, if you're just starting out with a centre pin, the type of cast you want to do is what they call the Nottingham cast. And this involves taking 2 loops of line from the first ring like that, and then just swing and release like that. For the Wallis cast, you take the weight between those 2 fingers, curl your thumb round the line and take off about that much. Lock the spool with that thumb and pull so to put a little bit of a bend in the rod. Back with the same action as the Nottingham cast, but as I get the rod out towards mid-river, I perform a number of functions at the same time, and this is the difficult bit. First of all, you pull with your thumb on the your left thumb and release with your right thumb to get the spool spinning. You then release the weight from between your fingers and let the spring of the rod throw it into mid-river, like this. There we go. Let me show you the Wallis cast again. Remember, this is all about timing, and timing requires practice. I always advise people to get themselves a little spinning rod, put their centre pin on it, with about 30 yards of line on the spool and a ½ ounce lead weight on the end. Sit on their doorstep and just practice flicking it into the garden. It's important to lock the reel with the right thumb at this point to maintain the bend in the end of the rod, and don't release the reel until the float is on its way. Bend in the rod tip slightly with the reel locked with your right thumb and just There, like that. That is the Wallis cast. It gives you a little more distance and perhaps a little more accuracy. It's not easy, but it's worth working at. It's just a matter of practice. This is what the centre pin is ideally suited for, trotting afloat on a river. This river is noted for its grayling. There are also some coarse fish in here, but mostly grayling. If you allow the float to go downstream the same speed as the surface, then it will precede the bait and you won't get decent bites, and plus the fact the bait will look unnatural to the fish. So it's all about control, and control is maintained with the right thumb in my case. One thing I will say, if you spend a couple of hours trotting a river with a float like this, you'll learn more about the geography of the bottom than you will fishing it all season with a ledger, because you have to know when to hold back to get the bait over the obstacles and when to let it go. It's now 30 yards down, which is quite a long way down, but because of this lack of stretch in the braid, I can still set a hook quite comfortably at this distance. When you're retrieving like this quite quickly, that's where that swivel I showed you early on is quite important. If I had double red maggot on there, the two maggots tend to act as a propeller and cause line twist, and that can cause you all sorts of problems after a few runs down. Put a lot more pressure on this fish than you could with a fixed ball reel, because there are no gears for me to lose my mechanical advantage through. And with this thumb on the spool of the reel, I can control the fish perfectly, and if it does make a last bolt for freedom when it sees the net, I can give it line. Another chub.